4 college students went to bed after what seemed like a normal Saturday night. By morning, all 4 had been killed inside the home they shared. There were no signs of forced entry. 2 roommates inside the house survived. 4 weeks, police had no suspect, and the case left people across the country asking the same question. Who could have done something so terrible, and why? As investigators followed tiny pieces of evidence one by one, the picture slowly became clearer. The answers would lead to one of the biggest murder investigations in recent American history. But even after a guilty plea and a life sentence, many questions still remain. This is the case of Bryan Kohberger, the night that changed everything. The victims were 4 University of Idaho students with bright futures ahead of them: Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. On the night of November 12th into the early morning of November 13th, 2022, they spent the evening with friends before returning to the off-campus house where several of them lived in Moscow, Idaho. It was a normal college weekend. Nothing suggested their lives were about to end. Sometime after they returned home, an attacker entered the house while most of the residents were asleep and stabbed the 4 students to death. The attack was fast and extremely violent. 2 other roommates were inside the house but were not harmed. One of them later told police she heard strange noises during the night and saw a man in the house before he left through a sliding glass door. Terrified, she locked herself in her room. Hours passed before police were called, after friends who came by the next day couldn't wake one of the victims. When officers arrived, they found one of the most disturbing crime scenes they had ever encountered. A quiet college town was suddenly the center of a case that would draw attention from around the world. News spread fast. Students were afraid, parents rushed to bring their kids home, and people wondered whether a killer was still out there. Police admitted they had far more questions than answers: no murder weapon, no clear motive, no suspect. As investigators secured the scene, forensic teams photographed every room and collected DNA, fingerprints, and anything else that might explain what had happened. The investigation begins. This quickly became one of the largest investigations in Idaho's history, with local police joined by Idaho State Police and the FBI. They interviewed hundreds of people, chased thousands of tips, and combed through security footage from around the neighborhood. Rumors moved faster than facts. Innocent people were accused online with no evidence, and police repeatedly asked the public to stop spreading speculation. Investigators wanted to build a case that would hold up in court, not rush to an arrest. One of the earliest breaks came from surveillance video showing a white Hyundai Elantra driving through the neighborhood multiple times in the early morning hours, then leaving shortly after the murders were believed to have occurred. Police asked the public for help identifying the car, and thousands of new tips poured in. As officers cross-checked vehicle registration records against the emerging evidence, one name began to surface. At the same time, forensic experts were analyzing DNA from the scene alongside cell phone and digital records, slowly building a timeline pointing toward a single suspect: the search for the killer. Detectives narrowed thousands of possible Hyundai Elantra matches down to one name: Bryan Kohberger, a Ph.D. student in criminology at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington, a short drive from Moscow. He owned a white Elantra matching the one on camera. Rather than arrest him immediately, investigators quietly built the case further, watching his movements and reviewing his background, phone records, and vehicle history. Surveillance footage reportedly showed the same car circling the victim's neighborhood on several occasions before the attack, and again leaving the area right after. Cell phone records became central to the case. Prosecutors said Kohberger's phone appeared to travel toward Moscow in the early morning hours before the killings, then stopped reporting its location for a stretch of time close to when the murders happened, before becoming active again as it moved away, though the defense later disputed how that data should be interpreted. No single piece of evidence stood alone, but together, investigators believed they were converging on one suspect: the evidence against Bryan Kohberger. The most pivotal piece of physical evidence was a leather knife sheath found on a bed near 2 of the victims. The murder weapon itself was never recovered, but forensic testing found a single source of male DNA on the sheath snap. Investigators didn't initially know whose DNA it was. Using investigative genetic genealogy, a technique that combined traditional DNA analysis with public genealogy databases, they eventually narrowed the search. After Kohberger traveled to his family's home in Pennsylvania, authorities collected discarded trash from the property and found the DNA closely matched what was on the sheath. Once he was arrested, a direct DNA sample confirmed the match. Idaho's court later ruled that the genetic genealogy technique used to identify him did not violate his constitutional rights. Alongside the DNA, prosecutors pointed to the white Hyundai Elantra's movements caught on camera, cell phone activity placing him near the victim's neighborhood on multiple occasions before the attack, and a surviving roommate's account of seeing a man with distinctive bushy eyebrows in the house the night of the killings. Investigators say that even without the DNA on the sheath, they likely would have eventually traced the case back to Kohberger through the sheer volume of Hyundai Elantra records they were working through. The arrest. By the time police were ready to act, Kohberger had already driven cross-country with his father to his family's home in Pennsylvania after the semester ended. Investigators kept building their case even after he left Idaho. Once a judge determined there was probable cause, an arrest warrant was approved. In the early morning hours, law enforcement surrounded the Kohberger family home in Pennsylvania and took him into custody without incident. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. The arrest made national news within minutes, bringing relief to a frightened public, but investigators were quick to caution that an arrest was only the beginning of a long legal process. Kohberger was extradited back to Idaho to face trial. The court case. Back in Idaho, the case became one of the most closely watched in the country, drawing packed courtrooms and constant media coverage. Because of the intense public attention, the judge placed strict limits on what attorneys and investigators could say publicly to protect the fairness of the process. A judge entered a not guilty plea on Kohberger's behalf to allow the case to proceed, and prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty if he was convicted at trial. Over the following months and years, both sides filed extensive motions. The defense challenged aspects of the investigation, including the genetic genealogy techniques used to identify him, while prosecutors argued the combined evidence clearly tied him to the crime. With thousands of photos, hours of surveillance footage, DNA reports, and phone records to sort through, the case moved slowly toward a scheduled trial. The guilty plea that changed everything. Weeks before trial was set to begin, the case took an unexpected turn. On July 2, 2025, Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty to all 4 murders and the burglary charge. In exchange, prosecutors agreed not to pursue the death penalty, and as part of the deal, Kohberger waived his right to appeal. The plea meant no jury trial and spared the families weeks of graphic testimony. During the hearing, the judge questioned Kohberger closely to ensure he understood what he was giving up, and he admitted guilt in open court. For many, the plea came as a surprise after years of legal preparation for trial, and it meant the public would never hear prosecutors lay out their full case in court. Kohberger has never publicly explained why he did it, and to date, no official motive has been established. The Goncalves family in particular was vocal in their frustration with the plea deal, saying it denied them the full clarity a trial might have provided. The families speak. At the sentencing hearing on July 23, 2025, family members and the 2 surviving roommates delivered powerful victim impact statements. They described Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan as kind, funny, and full of promise, remembering birthdays, family gatherings, and futures that would never happen. Some spoke directly to Kohberger. Kaylee Goncalves' sister called him a sociopath to his face, and the courtroom broke into applause. One surviving roommate described the lasting trauma of that night, saying it shattered her ability to trust the world around her. Another victim's stepfather remembered her as someone who brought joy wherever she went. Through it all, Kohberger showed little visible reaction. The sentence. Judge Stephen Hippler acknowledged the enormity of the loss before handing down the sentence. For consecutive fixed life sentences without the possibility of parole for the murders, plus an additional 10-year sentence for burglary. Under Idaho law, the fixed terms mean Kohberger will never be eligible for parole. He is being held at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. When given the chance to speak, Kohberger declined, saying only, "I respectfully decline." He offered no explanation and no apology. For some families, the sentence brought relief that a trial and years of appeals were now avoided. For others, frustration remained. The biggest question of all was still unanswered. The questions that remain. Even after the guilty plea, the central mystery persists. Why did he do it? No official motive has ever been confirmed, and Kohberger has offered no explanation. Investigators have said there's no evidence linking him to the victims through social media or any prior connection, and no evidence he had a violent history before that night. It also remains unclear whether the victims were specifically targeted or whether the house itself was simply the target of opportunity. Authorities have consistently said they found no evidence anyone else was involved, and investigators cleared the surviving roommates of any wrongdoing. They were treated strictly as witnesses. As one investigator put it, even without the DNA evidence, they believe they eventually would have identified Kohberger through the sheer scale of vehicle records alone. The case is a striking example of how modern investigations lean on many types of evidence: DNA, surveillance video, cell phone data, and witness accounts, with each piece only telling part of the story until combined. The Moscow community was changed permanently by the murders. The house itself was later demolished to help residents move forward. Conclusion: the murders of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin shocked the nation and changed a quiet college town forever. What began as a case with almost no leads became one built through patient police work, forensic science, and digital evidence. In the end, Bryan Kohberger admitted his guilt and will spend the rest of his life in prison. But some questions may never be answered. Why were these 4 students targeted? What was going through the killer's mind? Those answers may never come. What is known is that 4 families lost loved ones with their whole lives ahead of them. A community lost its sense of safety. And a case that gripped the world became one of the most unforgettable criminal investigations in recent memory. Our thoughts remain with the families of Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan. Their lives should be remembered for who they were, not only for the crime that took them from the people who loved them. What do you think about this case? Do you believe every important question has been answered, or will some parts of this story always remain a mystery? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video informative, please like it, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next true crime story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.